Well, today I want to talk about an archaeological discovery called the Crucifixion Heel. And when you read in Isaiah 53, for example, where it talks about him being pierced, it's a prophecy of the Messiah. It says, but he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. And actually the whole description of Isaiah 53 is about the work and ministry and life of Christ, and even how he'd be buried, whole 9 yards. And then, of course, we get to the New Testament. You read the Gospels, and you see how that many other prophecies were fulfilled. Over 300 prophecies, or if you distill them down, it's about 109 specific prophecies were fulfilled at the first coming. But all that to say, there's been a debate. Again, I want to look at what skeptics would say, and then how an archaeological discovery blows their argument out of the water and supports prophecy and the record of Scripture. So all these prophecies about the suffering servant who would come and die. Matter of fact, there's even typology in the Old Testament, all through Leviticus and stuff, pointing to the sacrificial nature of the coming Messiah. Numbers 22, I believe it is, where God told Moses how to set up the tribes according to their north, south, east, and west location of the tabernacle. If you do the math there, it makes a perfect picture of a cross. So there's several places in the Old Testament before crucifixion was even invented that the Bible points to crucifixion in these strange ways. But anyway, all that to say, critics have said that the Romans would not have spent precious metal on anything used for criminals. So they said they believed that when people were crucified, they were merely tied by their hands and their feet to the cross. And of course, that was done from time to time. But their argument was that nails were never used in crucifixion. Another argument they had is that crucified criminals were never given an ability to be buried. They were never allowed to have the bodies taken and be buried. And also, they argued that the legs were never broken, that it didn't make sense for them to break the legs of any crucifixion victims. So anyway, but then in 1968, we have an amazing discovery. During the excavation of a first century tomb, there was an ossuary that was found. And an ossuary it's called a bone box. And basically what the culture did at that time, and it was only about 100 year or so period where they did this in ancient Israel, where they would put them on a flat slab of stone, like we read about when Jesus was buried, in a tomb. And then after about a year, after the body rots and everything else, and all that's left is the bones, they'd go back in, gather up the bones, put it in a bone box or an ossuary. And some of them were, poor people didn't have very decorative ones, but if somebody was significant stature or a famous person or had a lot of money, they would have these highly decorated bone boxes or ossuaries that they would use. So anyway, an ossuary, and there have been about 100 of these nails found. So that kind of proved, okay, the Romans did use the nails for something. What did they use them for? But the critics would say, well, they haven't found any of them in a person's bone or in a they don't have the wood, but in anything else that would give them an indication that it was used for crucifixion, until this discovery in 1968. There's an ossuary of someone named Yehohanan, a bone box that was found, and it was very ornate. And it was a first century BC to around AD 70 is about the time period when they did this kind of bone box thing. But anyway, here's the amazing thing. They found in this bone box a 4.5-inch nail still stuck through the heel bone. And the end of the nail was bent and curved. So when the Romans obviously what happened was when they were nailing it into the wood, it hit a knot and bent it. So that they didn't bother reusing that one. And that's what they would do, is they would crucify one person because metal was kind of valuable. They would crucify someone when they're dead. They'd pull it out. They'd reuse the nails in the next victim. But here we have a case where it hit a knot in the wood and bent. So they just left it in the victim's foot. And it's still, when they discovered it, it was still in the bone. So this proves that crucifixion victims were nailed to the cross using spikes, that they were also allowed to have dignified burials, even though they are criminals. Like I said, during this short 100 to 150 year period where they would put them on a stone slab and then later put their bones in a bone box. And also, by the way, this person's legs were severely broken. If you remember, when they came to Jesus, they were going to break his legs so that the Jewish people didn't want him hanging on a cross when the Sabbath began. So the soldier went to break the legs of Jesus, but he was already dead, so they didn't break his legs, which is also for fulfillment of prophecy. It says not one of his legs were broken. I believe that's Psalm in one of the Psalms. I forget which one at the moment. But anyway, so this discovery, like many other archaeological discoveries, supports the details that we find in Scripture. Again, it doesn't prove anything crystal clear like somebody was there with a camcorder, but it shows that over and over again, when we find something, an archaeological discovery or something of major historicity, it always supports what the Bible said. There has not been one single archaeological discovery that disproves a detail in the Bible, and that's significant. So anyway, there's another discovery that I thought you'd find interesting, that it would build up your faith a little bit, maybe be a discovery that you never heard of, that verifies the words of Scripture, that Jesus indeed was crucified with nails, just as depicted, and that his legs were not broken, but that often people's legs would be broken. So anyway, pretty neat thing. Be sure to like, share, subscribe. And again, I'm going to do a bunch of these in this series on kind of the collision of Bible prophecy and archaeology. And I think apologetics is very important because it does strengthen our faith as believers. It answers some questions of the critics, which hopefully breaks down some barriers to people coming to Christ. I think anybody who is looking for truth genuinely will find Jesus. All truth is God's truth. All truth ultimately leads to Jesus Christ. So I pray that you enjoy this, that you share it. Please, again, like, share, subscribe, and I'll talk to you again soon. Take care.